Are your coping strategies secretly sabotaging your recovery? Today, we're exposing the hidden traps and common distraction techniques. Welcome to Tame Your Trich, the podcast dedicated to helping you overcome trichotillomania and other BFRBs. I'm your host, Kayla Pena. In this episode, you'll discover why some popular coping methods might be holding you back. You'll also learn the unexpected power of self-compassion in overcoming trichotillomania. Plus, I'll share my personal story of how a seemingly helpful tool became a new compulsion. I know we're all busy, so my goal is to be brief, concise, and intentional, ensuring you get the valuable information you need without taking up too much of your time. Let's dive right in. The distraction dilemma: short-term relief versus long-term recovery. We've all heard about distraction techniques for managing trichotillomania, right? Fidget toys, stress balls, keeping your hands busy. These are often the first line of defense against pulling urges. And there's a good reason for that. They work, at least in the short term. Distraction techniques can provide immediate relief when you're in the grip of an urge to pull. They give your hands something else to do, redirect your focus, and can help you get through those intense moments of temptation. In the heat of the moment, reaching for a fidget toy instead of your hair feels like a victory, and it is. But here's where it gets tricky, and this part may surprise you. While these distraction techniques can be incredibly helpful in the moment, over-relying on them can actually hinder your long-term recovery. Let me explain why. When we constantly distract ourselves from our urges, we're not actually addressing the root cause of our trichotillomania. We're putting a band-aid on the symptom. It's like trying to ignore a leaky pipe by mopping up the water instead of fixing the leak. Sure, your floor is dry for now, but the problem is still there, getting worse over time. Moreover, constantly distracting yourself can prevent you from developing crucial skills for long-term management of trich. Skills like sitting with discomfort, understanding your triggers, and developing healthier coping mechanisms. By always reaching for a distraction, you might be missing opportunities to really understand and work through your urges. There's also the risk of creating a new dependency. As I'll share in my personal story later, it's surprisingly easy for a distraction tool to become a crutch that you can't function without. This can lead to a whole new set of problems. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying distraction techniques are bad or that you should never use them. They absolutely have their place in trich management. The key is to use them mindfully, as part of a broader strategy, rather than relying on them as your only tool. So what's the takeaway here? It's all about balance. Use distraction techniques when you need that immediate relief, but also make sure you're working on long-term strategies. This might include therapy, mindfulness practices, or addressing underlying anxiety or stress. The goal is not to just resist the urge to pull, but to understand it, work through it, and ultimately reduce its power over you. Remember, managing trich is a journey, not a quick fix. By understanding the pros and cons of distraction techniques, you can use them more effectively as part of your overall recovery strategy. The substitution surprise: when alternatives become new compulsions. Now let's move on to our second point, the substitution surprise. We've talked about distraction techniques, but what about substitution strategies? These are the methods where we replace hair pulling with a different, less harmful behavior. It's a popular approach, and at a glance, it seems like a perfect solution. Common substitution strategies might include twirling a strand of fake hair, using a scalp massager, or even gently tugging on a piece of string. The idea is to mimic the sensory experience of pulling without causing damage, and initially, these strategies can be incredibly effective. The benefits of substitutions are clear. You're satisfying the urge to engage in a repetitive behavior, but you're doing it in a way that doesn't harm your hair or skin. It can provide that sense of relief and control that many of us seek from pulling. Plus, it can help break the immediate habit of reaching for your hair when you're stressed or anxious. For many trich warriors, substitution strategies have been a game changer. They've helped people reduce or even stop pulling entirely, at least for a while. It's a way to scratch the itch without causing damage, and that's no small feat. But here's where the surprise comes in, and it's a twist that many people don't see coming. Sometimes these substitution behaviors can take on a life of their own. What starts as a helpful alternative, in some cases, become a new compulsion. Imagine you've successfully replaced your hair pulling with a twirling piece of string. Great, right? But what if you find yourself unable to go anywhere without that string? What if you're spending hours twirling it, just like you used to spend hours pulling? What if the anxiety you feel when you can't engage in this behavior is just as intense as when it was with pulling? This is the substitution surprise, the realization that you haven't actually addressed the underlying compulsion. You've just changed its form. And in some ways, this new compulsion might be even trickier to deal with because it doesn't have the obvious negative consequences that hair pulling does. It's a bit like whack-a-mole. You think you've solved one problem only to have another pop up in its place. And because the new behavior isn't causing visible harm, it can be harder to recognize it as a problem. Now, this doesn't mean substitution strategies are bad or that they don't work. They can be incredibly helpful, especially as a part of a broader treatment. The key is to use them mindfully and to be aware of how your relationship with the substitution behavior develops over time. If you're using substitution strategies, pay attention to how much time you're spending on the substitution behavior. Are you able to engage in it briefly and then move on with your day? Or are you finding that it's taking up more and more of your time and mental energy? Also, consider whether the substitute behavior is helping you work through your urges or just masking them. Ideally, a good substitution strategies should help you become more aware of your triggers and urges, not less. Remember, the goal isn't just to stop pulling. It's to address the underlying factors that drive the behavior in the first place. Substitution can be a valuable tool in that process, but it's not the entire solution. My personal story, the fidget toy trap. I spent over 15 years in the dental field, starting as an office coordinator and eventually becoming a dental consultant. It was a highly competitive, cutthroat industry, and I worked my way through all the administrative positions. The stress was immense, and it significantly contributed to my urges to pull my hair. During that time, I bought hundreds of thousands worth of toys and distraction tools, trying to find anything that will help me cope. When I was a treatment coordinator, I found myself stuck on the furry fidget style. This position required me to educate patients on the dental work they needed, explain why it was necessary, and discuss the cost involved. I would go over their financial options, including their insurance coverage, co-pays, and third-party financing if needed. I did this for 10 to 20 patients a day, 5 days a week, for a little over 7 years. The pressure to meet weekly and monthly goals was relentless. The constant stress took a toll on my physical, emotional, and psychological health. I became dependent on the furry fidget toy to the point where it became unhealthy. What started as a simple distraction tool to help me manage my urges turned into a crutch. I found myself unable to function without it, and instead of alleviating my trichotillomania, it backfired. I remember one particularly grueling week where the patient load was heavier than usual. My hands were constantly reaching for the fidget toy, and I noticed that I was using it more and more frequently. The short-term relief it provided was undeniable, but I began to realize that I was merely masking the problem rather than addressing it. The fidget toy had become a new compulsion, and I was trapped in a cycle of dependency. The breaking point came during a meeting with my supervisor. I was discussing my performance and the goals I needed to meet, and I couldn't stop fidgeting. My supervisor noticed and asked if I was okay. It was in that moment that I realized how much the fidget toy had taken over my life. I felt a wave of shame and frustration wash over me. The very tool I had relied on to help me cope had become a hindrance. This experience taught me a valuable lesson about the double-edged nature of coping strategies. While distraction techniques can provide immediate relief, over-relying on them can lead to new compulsions and ultimately hinder long-term recovery. It's crucial to find a balance and address the root causes of trichotillomania rather than just treating the symptoms. In my journey to recovery, I had to learn to let go of the fidget toy and find healthier ways to manage my stress and urges. It wasn't easy, but it was a necessary step towards healing. My story is a testament to the importance of understanding the complexities of coping strategies and finding what truly works for you. Hey, really quickly, if you want to help me in my mission to spread BFRB truth, just subscribe and listen to these videos up until the end, which will help YouTube's algorithm recommend these videos to more people who find these tips and stories helpful. Your subscription fuels my mission to tame the trich and beyond, and you'll stay updated on the latest techniques and insights to help you on your path. I would be so grateful if you can click that subscribe button. And we're back. The Mindfulness Miracle, awareness as a double-edged sword. Let's move on to our third main point, the Mindfulness Miracle. Mindfulness has become a buzzword in mental health circles, and for good reason. It's a powerful tool for managing trichotillomania and other BFRBs, but like any tool, it has its complexities. Mindfulness is all about being present in the moment, fully aware of your thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without judgment. For those of us dealing with trich, this can be incredibly beneficial. By practicing mindfulness, you can become more attuned to the early signs of an urge to pull. You can notice the tension building up in your body, the anxious thoughts creeping in, and the subtle movements of your hands. This heightened awareness allows you to intervene earlier, potentially stopping a pulling episode before it starts. Imagine you're sitting quietly practicing mindfulness. You notice the urge to pull creeping in. Instead of reacting automatically, you take a deep breath, acknowledge the urge without judgment, and choose a different response. This can be incredibly empowering and can help break the cycle of automatic pulling. But here's where it gets mind-bending, and this is something that is often not talked about. While mindfulness can help you become more aware of your urges, it can also sometimes increase them. How? By bringing your attention to the very sensations and thoughts that trigger the behavior. For some, the act of focusing on the urge can make it feel more intense. It's like when someone tells you not to think about a pink elephant, and suddenly, it's all you can think about. In the same way, focusing on the urge to pull can sometimes make it feel more powerful and harder to resist. This doesn't mean mindfulness is a bad strategy, far from it, but it does mean that it's important to approach it with a nuanced understanding. If you find that heightened awareness is increasing your urges, it might be helpful to pair mindfulness with other techniques, like cognitive behavioral strategies or relaxation exercises. Another aspect to consider is the type of mindfulness practice you're engaging in. Some people find that body-focused mindfulness, where you pay close attention to physical sensations, can be more triggering. In these cases, practices like mindful breathing or guided imagery, which focus on something external or neutral, might be more effective. The key takeaway here is that mindfulness is a powerful tool, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's about finding the right balance and the right type of practice that works for you. And if you find that mindfulness is increasing your urges, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means you need to adjust your approach. The goal of mindfulness is not to eliminate urges, but to change your relationship with them. It's about learning to observe your urges without immediately reacting to them, creating a space where you can choose a different response. The self-compassion solution, your Trich-Proof superpower. Now let's dive into our final and perhaps most powerful point, the self-compassion solution. We've talked about distraction, substitution, and mindfulness. But there's one tool that can supercharge all of these strategies and transform your relationship with trich. Self-compassion. Self-compassion isn't just about letting yourself off the hook or giving up on progress. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you'd offer a good friend. It's recognizing that struggling with trich doesn't make you flawed or weak, it makes you human. Here's where it gets really interesting. Research has shown that self-compassion can actually reduce the frequency and intensity of pulling episodes. How? By lowering stress and anxiety, which are often major triggers for trich. When you're kind to yourself, you're less likely to get caught in the cycle of shame and frustration that can lead to more pulling. But don't just take my word for it. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Picture yourself after a particularly bad pulling episode. You're standing in front of the mirror, feeling that all too familiar mix of frustration and disappointment, but this time instead of berating yourself, you decide to try something different. You look at your reflection and say, I know you're hurting, this is really hard, but you're doing your best, and I'm here for you. It might feel awkward at first, but you keep at it. Every time you feel the urge to pull, or after an episode, you pause and offer yourself words of kindness. Gradually, you'll start to notice something changing. The urges don't disappear, but they lose some of their power. You find yourself better able to resist pulling. And when you do pull, you can bounce back faster without spiraling into self-criticism. This isn't just a hypothetical scenario. This is the power of self-compassion in action, and it's a tool that's available to you right now. Let's try a simple self-compassion exercise together. It's called the self-compassion break, and it only takes a minute. Here's how it goes. 1. Place your hand over your heart or another soothing spot. 2. Take 3 deep breaths. 3. Say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. Suffering is a part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment. That's it. Simple, right? But don't underestimate its power. This little practice can be a lifeline when you're in the grip of an urge or dealing with the aftermath of a pulling episode. Remember, your trick doesn't define you. It's just one part of your complex, beautiful self. By cultivating self-compassion, you're not just managing symptoms. You're nurturing a kinder, more understanding relationship with yourself. Every step you take towards understanding and managing your trick is a victory. And that, my friend, is the ultimate trick-proof superpower. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a powerful thought. If you change your view of stress, you can change how your body reacts in response to it. Stress isn't an immovable mountain. It's a challenge that you have a power to overcome. Think of it this way. If you believe stress is something you have absolutely no control over, then you'll probably feel like a fly caught in a spider's web. But the moment you realize you can get out of the web, everything changes for the better. I've spoken to many people who tell me, I don't know why I can't pull through. I don't know why I feel so blocked. And then we start digging a little deeper. Often, the answers are right in front of their faces, but for some reason, they can't quite put two and two together. Our reality is constructed in a way that sometimes makes it very difficult to see the things that are blocking us, even when they're right under our noses. Maybe it's an excuse we've made for a situation or a person. It's usually something or someone in our lives holding us back from becoming the most optimal version of ourselves. So if you're feeling blocked, take a step back and scan your environment. Look at all the finer details. Just as we have supportive forces constantly working in our favor, there's also a force that works against us. This is called resistance. That's why it's crucial to do regular check-ins and reviews of your environment and circumstances. Make sure you haven't lost yourself somewhere along the way. Holding yourself accountable is the key. Remember, you have the power to change your narrative. You have the strength to critically evaluate your coping strategies and make the necessary adjustments. Don't let resistance hold you back. Embrace the journey, stay vigilant, and keep moving forward. You're not just managing trick, you're reclaiming your life. You've got this. Your voice matters in this journey to conquer BFRBs. Drop your thoughts and stories in the comments. Join our Facebook group or message me directly. Together, we're stronger. But before you go back to grabbing that strand of hair or scanning for that perfect spot to pick, why not channel that urge into something more productive? Hit that subscribe and like button. It's like finding the most satisfying hair to pull, but without the guilt trip afterwards. Plus, every time you click, a trickster somewhere finds the strength to put down the tweezers. So, are you ready to turn your BFRB superpowers into a force for good? Subscribe now and join our tribe. Thank you for being a part of this transformative journey. Keep your heads held high. Better days lie ahead for taming the trick. This is Kayla Pena, signing off.